At that time, there was an eviction moratorium during COVID. I really wanted to sell my house, right? Because my house has now escalated from the $395,000 that I bought it for into $1 million. I definitely don't want to deal with this tenant situation anymore. It was extremely toxic. She can say anything she wants to me, and if I say anything back, that will get me sued, and I will lose. I don't have a free lawyer. I have to pay for my own lawyer. And I have no money. I'm a single mom. That's why I have somebody in my house that I am renting to. So it was a journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Invested and Rested. Today we have Hannah Kirk on as a guest, and she is local to me in the Bay Area, and she has one crazy tenant story for you. You literally wouldn't believe it unless you heard it from the source, and she's going to tell us all about it. And she's also going to share with us how she's investing in real estate still in a different, more restful way without tenant battles. It's encouraging to hear her story from going to the tough part to the awesome part of real estate investing. So excited for you to take a listen.
And before we get started, we just want to let you know we have $300 off of our retreats, special that we are running for Black Friday only for 1 week. So go to our website, which is linked below. Get all the information on there. Feel free to send us a DM on Instagram as well. We will be having one retreat in Minnesota near me in March, and then we will have one near Caitlin in the Bay Area in May. So grab your seat right now. It is going to be so much fun. And now take a listen to Hannah, and we'll see you soon.
Hannah, we're so excited to have you here today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am a single mom of 2 children. I am currently on a journey to find real estate as a business. Been doing real estate investing as a business for a little while, and now I'm really doubling down on it after I got laid off in June.
We met at a networking event recently, and I heard like a little snippet of your story, and I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds super interesting. I need to know more, even though it sounds like a horror story. But I think it's really cool to hear the horror stories and hear like the other side of it as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that first investment and what happened?
So I'll give you my little 30-second, well, maybe more like 2-minute pitch that I give when I'm at the investor meetings. So essentially, I bought a house in 2011 with my then husband as my primary residence. And in 2016, we got divorced. And I was able to keep the home, which was a huge win. And there was a lower level of a house. It was a multi-level house. So there's like an upper level where I lived, and then I put a bathroom on the lower level. And I had actually rented it out briefly to another single mom because I'm a single mom. I could use the help. Like, please, can you rent this room? And then we can like for reduced rent, and we can share responsibilities. I'd really love the support, honestly. So I brought her in, and that was great. We had 2 months of loveliness, and then she moved out, and I was like, oh, like she's like a sister to me still to this day. I know, right? But then I turned it into an Airbnb for about 2 years. Then after about 2 years of that, I got another job. It was really stressful, worked in the tech industry, and was like, okay, I could use that support again. So I shut down the Airbnb and invited another single mom to live with me in community, same idea. And that was October of 2019. And then that didn't work out as well. And about 8 months later, I wanted her to leave. And, I worked very hard to try to get her to leave in a way that was good for her and not like with a positive outcome, not just kicking her out and leaving her on the street. And at that time, there was an eviction moratorium during COVID. And that eviction moratorium in Alameda County prevented me from removing someone I shared a kitchen or a bathroom with. And it lasted for another 3.5 years. So during that time, I really wanted to sell my house, right? Because my house has now escalated from the $395,000 that I bought it for in 2011 to $1 million. The one next door was sold for $1.3 million around that time.
Wow.
And I'm like,
Amazing.
I want out. I don't want to be in Oakland anymore. And I definitely don't want to deal with this tenant situation anymore. It was extremely toxic, and I'll definitely go into that in a little while. But I pulled some of my equity out at that time and bought 6 houses in Kansas City, Missouri. In fact, it's a little more complicated than that, because the first house I bought, I'd actually been saving money for a down payment to buy a second house in Oakland to be a landlord. But after the eviction moratorium and all of the crap I was going through then, I was like, I am not buying anything in Oakland. So I'm just going to use that money the $30,000 that I already had saved up. That was, nowhere near enough to buy a property in Oakland, was plenty of money for a down payment in Kansas City, Missouri. And then that first experience worked out so well, I was able to take the equity out and buy the additional homes. So that's how I got started.
Tell us more about the woman, and why was she paying rent? Like, what was going on?
At first, she was paying rent. And what's interesting is, like, during the time that we were getting along, I got to know her really well, and I helped her get child support from her kid's father. I helped her, with various job related activities. So I was kind of aware of how much money she was making, which was not a lot, but it was enough to pay the rent. That much I know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually didn't ever pay her own rent. She actually would go to organizations in Oakland that give money for paying rent for you on your behalf. So if you're at risk of homelessness, which she had actually been homeless a long time before. And I don't know if I knew that before she moved in or if I learned that after, but she came highly recommended from a friend of mine. I actually was a little on the fence about even having somebody move in like that at that time. And then when the friend of my friend, who I really, really trust, my friend at least, I trust my friend, but the other friend, she was just like, yeah, she's great. I lived with her. She's amazing. And I'm like, sounds good. I guess let's do this. Right. And she's also Black and I am white. So I was also like, there's a power differential here, and I also wanted to be open to new experiences, right? I wanted to embrace somebody different from me, somebody different culture from me, and try to really heal the wounds of racism really by being in community together. And then so anyway, because she had been at risk for homelessness and had lived a very different life than me, she had these organizations paying her rent. So when she stopped paying in July of 2021, I was like, hey, wait a minute. I know that you have the capacity to pay because number one, I know how much money you're getting from child support.
Yeah.
And number two, I know that you didn't even pay your own rent and you are very resourceful and all these organizations paid it on your behalf, which thank God those organizations exist. But the eviction moratorium in Alameda County at that time, there was absolutely 0 ways that you could remove anyone from a property. So they wouldn't allow access to the property. So this doesn't really apply to mine, but if you had a 1-bedroom or whatever, and the drain wasn't working properly, the landlord needs to come in to fix it. They could deny access and never actually get it fixed. And then the tenant would prevent fixing, but they could still sue the landlord for never fixing the,
so
drain.
Crazy.
I've actually heard some crazy stories. I don't even know if you would believe them, honestly, but my story, after I've heard the other stories, my story is I'm
Small
oh,
potatoes.
thank God that's all I had to deal with. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a wild time. So so she did eventually stop paying rent. And at that time that was pretty dismaying. I actually tried the one way you could evict that was allowed was the Ellis Act, which is part of Costa-Hawkins in California, which it basically is you remove the entire building from the rental market for 10 years. And my attorneys advised me that if you do this, you should expect a private investigator to follow you around for 10 years, because if you mess up, then it's a $1 million guaranteed lawsuit.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh. I've never heard this before. This is crazy, but also very interesting.
This is actually one of the things that we're voting on today.
Yes.
Costa-Hawkins tenants' rights, or what? I don't know what.
Prop 33. Vote
Prop
no on
33. Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I agree.
A little bit more on that. So I was able to do the Ellis Act, but I actually forgot to mention one detail, which I think is really critical to the story. And that is my tenant in Oakland gets free, unlimited legal help to sue her landlord. Now, in normal cases, that might make sense, right? Your landlord doesn't come and make repairs. Maybe you should be able to sue them, right? That's a logical, progression. In this case, though, it also includes things like harassment, which is very loosely defined, and judges define even like asking for your rent multiple times as harassment. So if you can imagine, I'm living in the same house with this woman. I'm seeing her many times a day. She can say anything she wants to me. And if I say anything back that is incorrect or wrong or hurtful or painful or anything that could be construed as harassment, that will get me sued and I will lose. I don't have a free lawyer. I have to pay for my own lawyer. And I have no money. I'm a single mom. That's why I have somebody in my house that I am renting to. So it was a journey.
So how did you end up getting her out?
Yeah. Well, okay. One thing I tried to do, which Ellis Act my house, right? So I told you about this complicated process. It's 10 years removal from the market. And you give 4 months notice to move out. And they can, at any point, the tenant can say, I need more time because I'm disabled or I'm elderly, or there's a lot of ways that they can extend that. She didn't for some reason. But on the 4th month, her eviction date came and went, and she didn't leave. And my lawyers told me at this time, if I wanted to evict her using this method, then I was going to have to go through another year of trying to get her out with an unlawful detainer, plus another $20,000 in legal fees. Mind you, I had already had to pay her move out expenses because this is a required thing if you do this process. So she didn't leave. I was facing all of that time and money, and I said, forget it, I'm out. So I just left the house, moved, took all my money and spent it on some rent at a very nice community called Alameda, which is where I live now. So then I went into forbearance on my mortgage because during COVID, that was actually allowed for about a year. And I was hopeful that maybe within that period of time, the eviction moratorium would end and I'd be able to maybe get her out and maybe move back in, maybe sell the house, whatever. Long story short, it ended before that year was up, but they put in additional protections in Oakland to keep landlords from being able to remove tenants. So I would have had to move back into my house, prove that my moving in was not retaliatory to evict her, and deal with all that trauma for God knows how long to get her out. And I was not about to go through that again. So I was, thank God, able to sell the house with her in it at a massive discount.
Wow.
So can I ask, how much did you sell it for? Or how much of a discount did you sell for?
So retail was probably, I don't know, 1.2 million at that time. And I sold it for 820,000.
Okay. Yeah. That's quite a bit of discount.
Almost 400K.
Yeah. I mean, I was fine. I came out ahead. I had bought it for, like I said, $395, but yeah.
But yeah, you lost out on a couple $100,000 and you lost your home. So you had to go rent somewhere else. And that's insane. Do you know if she's still there?
No, she was evicted in May. I did what I could to help the attorneys. The other part of this is really interesting is during the eviction moratorium, the laws were changing almost daily. And almost no attorneys really knew the law. So I would talk to many attorneys and they would say, oh, I think this is true. And I'm like, no, that's not allowed during the eviction moratorium. And here's the law. Let me point you to it. And I'd be sending them actual laws and be like, you need to read this. No, that's not allowed. It's amazing to me how few attorneys were actually aware of the details that I was painfully aware of.
Yeah. So I never expected that I would get Joey. I guess out of all the Friends characters, I always pictured myself, as a woman, but I guess it kind of makes sense that I got Joey.
Yeah, I can kind of see it. You just can sweet talk people. You could do some negotiating.
Go with the flow.
Yeah. Well, I got Monica, and at first I was like, what? And then I was like, yeah, I guess I could see it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I'm a little bossy, a little controlling. I'm not very clean, though, so that's why I didn't think.
I love it.
Her.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't know what we're talking about, you need to head to the show notes and go take our friends quiz, because we have a quiz that you can figure out what type of real estate investing you should do based off of your friend's character. So it's a super fun quiz. And as you heard, I'm Monica, Rihanna is Joey. So go find out who you are and let us know on Instagram. Send us a DM at Invested and Rested. My dad, during the eviction moratorium, he owns a 10-unit building in Danville, which is Contra Costa County is a little better than Alameda County in regards to tenant landlord rights. But he had a tenant that stopped paying rent, and he kept asking them are you going to pay rent? And he said, oh, I lost my job, blah, 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 which wasn't actually true. About a year later, the tenant across the hall called him and said, there's people moving in. And so he lives 2 blocks away. So he just ran over there. Luckily he was home, and he ran over while these people are moving in. And he's like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, well, we're subleasing this from so-and-so, his tenant. And my dad called the police, and the police he was then able to finally evict the guy because he was illegally subletting. So it was like the weirdest thing that you can evict someone for illegally subletting, but not evict them for paying rent, even when he had a job again. But my dad got so lucky that the neighbor called and that he got them before they'd completely moved in, because had they completely moved in, then they would have had squatters' rights. So it's just insane. And they were paying the guy like $500 a month, and my dad charges like $2,000 for that unit, like something insane. So of course somebody's gonna, take that right offer. Away. Yeah. So it's insane what happened during the moratorium, and insane how tenants take advantage of this situation. And it sucks, because what you were doing was trying to help someone out and like trying to be a good person and a good landlord and a good housemate, and then you got screwed over. So tell us a little bit about how it makes you feel about being a landlord now, and what you're doing differently because of your experience.
Yeah, that's a great question, because, many people who heard my story said, oh, thank God, like, oh my God, I would never be a landlord. I don't want to do that. That's crazy. And like, I doubled down and got 6 more houses. So, a few things. Number one, so I pivoted to sort of making this my full-time gig in June when I got laid off. And I joined a real estate investing group. And of course, in these groups, they're talking about all the different, problems one has with a tenant, or, there's a thing that needs to be fixed, and how do you fix it? Or should you fix it? Or am I responsible to fix it? And all these things, right? And as part of that, like, there's also people that own a lot of properties in one community, right? And in one case, I heard about a guy who owned like several properties in a neighborhood, and maybe owned the neighborhood. And I was like, oh my God, I never thought about the fact that like you could buy up a neighborhood and actually like cause gentrification on your own. That's very bizarre to me. But then I started to think about, I own these houses. I'm technically now a corporate landlord as a result of this thing that was trying to fight corporate landlords, right?
Yeah.
And as is it okay for me to take away a home ownership opportunity or rent it out? Really? Like, why is nobody having this conversation? And so I started to see this bad behavior, because one thing is for sure, I never want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. And how do we prevent that from happening? By having better behavior as real estate investors. So my life's passion now has become building a brand and podcast and everything around ethical real estate. How do we do real estate investing and still be ethical? Because I don't think that we have to sacrifice ethics to make money. I just think we need to be thoughtful about what we're doing when we're doing it, and really have that conversation out in the open.
So you think that, tenants are misbehaving because they've run into so many bad landlords?
No. Well, maybe. But I think that's why we have tenants' rights. right? We have tenants' rights because of bad behavior from landlords or corporations or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot here, right? There's a whole like myth of, in Oakland, for example, all of the media is very slanted pro-tenant. There are more tenants than there are landlords or homeowners in Oakland, California. So a lot of the narrative is, oh, these poor tenants, like, corporate landlords are taking advantage of them, and there's this idea that there are just all the properties in Oakland are owned by corporate landlords. But that's not true. About 70% are owned, and nationally even, are owned by small mom and pop, which I don't love that name, but small mom and pop landlords that have 1, 2, maximum like 4 properties, right? And all of these people, many of them I've gotten to know personally who had terrible stories during the eviction moratorium. They are really good people and they really want to do the right thing. But what's interesting is there's the corporations who have bad behavior, but these laws that are intended to be for corporations, the corporations, they can get around them. They have the money to circumvent and go through legal processes, and they have expertise and all of this. But the small mom and pop landlords, the very tiny, like investors like us, like we get screwed. We're the ones who are suffering. So it's a tricky world.
Yeah. Does that make you want to get involved in like policy, like advocating for landlord rights, or what is your thought around how it's going to actually change?
I don't know that I have a stance, specifically policy right now. Where I am at right now is in sort of investigating what are all the different ways people are doing real estate ethically. So there are, amazing organizations that are trying to build housing. There are organizations that are using like backyard lots that are trying to build housing. Building housing, I've become aware as a result of this, is one of the best ways we can avoid this happening, because the more housing there is, the cheaper everything gets, right? It's a very simple economic policy. And when prices, when there's more supply, the prices go down and then problem solved. Also, home ownership for people is really important. And I think finding ways to help people creatively own homes, especially where it's very expensive, and like in California, is a really great ethical approach to investing as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's hard to figure out exactly what the best way to go around it is, because there's so many economic factors that are involved, and the laws in California are pretty crazy. I mean, my day job is a leasing agent, and I just work with mom and pop owners that do the property management themselves, but I help them with the leasing and running the applications. And they have the horror stories, or they've heard it from a friend, and they're trying to figure out how to alleviate it, not have it happen to them and whatnot. And it is scary. And it's honestly one of the reasons why I don't invest in California anymore, because it's too scary.
Now that I know what I know, in order to be a landlord in Oakland, I wouldn't even do it if you don't have 2 years worth of mortgage in the bank and $20,000 to $30,000 for legal expenses, because you should expect in a normal time that it will take you roughly 2 years to remove someone, during which time you will not be paid any rent, and you will be paying exorbitant legal fees to stand up against their landlords, because there's no mandatory mediation. There's not even really a slant towards mediation. Ideally, one of the policy, I guess I am somewhat involved in policy, because as a result of all this, I started speaking at rallies and doing PR for the California Apartment Association, like trying really hard to make this moratorium end. And I am, most of us are deeply involved now. Most of us are the landlords that had the eviction moratorium challenges. Most of us are deeply involved in trying to reverse all of the tenant protections, in California. And I don't know if reverse is really the right word, but making them reasonable and working for everybody, right? I think you should be able to invest in real estate, and you should have the American dream. I also think tenants shouldn't be able to take advantage of landlords either. And we should all be able to work together in finding a solution. Maybe that's idealistic, but.
Yeah. Do you feel like and I'm not in California, so I don't know, but do you feel like this eviction moratorium with COVID specifically happened because there were landlords just trying to kick people out because rents were rising so much, and that's how this all began? Or I don't know how things work in California. How did it get so over the top? And
it's a great
question. Who made those decisions?
It's a great question.
I'm like, yeah.
it's cumulative, is how it got that way, really. But I have a story about this, actually. So I remember I bought those houses in Kansas City, Missouri, and I had one tenant in them. This is towards the end of the eviction moratorium now, because it was about not the eviction moratorium, but towards the end of COVID. I'd been through that for a little while before I bought those properties, but excuse me. One of the tenants in one of my properties worked at a nursing home and got COVID and understandably couldn't go to work, right? So she couldn't pay her rent that month or was behind in her rent. And the property manager said, should I evict her? Should I file on her? And I was like, wait, no, she had COVID. She looks like she's trying to catch up. Like, let's let her try to catch up and let's give her some time, like at least a couple months, see how it goes. So this keeps happening. She's still slow. I think she's recovering. It takes time, right? And then they asked me another time, well, she still isn't caught up on her rent. Should we evict her? And I'm like, okay, let's get on the phone. Do you think this woman is trying to hustle me? And she's like, no, I don't think so. I think she just can't pay her rent. And I was like, okay, well then we're going to leave her there and let her keep trying to pay. So then she files for a relief assistance. And they say, okay, it's going to be 3 months before we get the assistance. We can go ahead and evict her. Do you want to go ahead and do that? And I was like, dear Lord, no, this woman over here, I applied for assistance and I'm trapped in my home at the mercy of my tenant who won't pay and the government won't make her and they won't make her prove hardship and she doesn't have to sign for the money. So I can't even get the money that's available for landlord funds. And you're telling me that there's money here that is coming to me and I'm just going to have to wait a few months. And you're trying to evict the person who needs the actual COVID hardship money? Hell no. But see, that's the contrast, right? You have one side where you can just kick out anytime, and you have the other side where it's hostage. So I don't even know.
There's got to be a happy medium. Yeah.
Exactly. These two extremes are not okay.
Yeah. So how is everything going with your Missouri properties?
Those are going really well. Yeah, I really love them, actually. I got in at a good time, I think, and that makes me very happy. And I am still trying to figure out how to be ethical as a landlord of 6 properties in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah. And so you have 2 triplexes? Is that what it is? Because you said you have 6 units?
I have one property that has 3 small homes on it. And then I have 3 additional single family homes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So 6 total. That's awesome. And what's next? What's in store for you next? What do you want to buy now?
Well, that's a great question. So I'm definitely on a path to try to investigate what ethical real estate means and what that looks like. And as a result, the first thing I'm doing is doing a new build in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have family out there and through circumstances met a business partner who wanted to build housing, also has a similar passion for ethical real estate and helping people through building homes. So he's doing that build. He's the contractor and I'm the financial partner. So right now we're building houses and kind of trying to figure out what's next for increasing home building and ownership. So maybe in the future, one of our plans is to build, say, 3 units on one lot and potentially sell 2 of them or one of them at a low affordable cost and then rent out 1 or 2 of the other ones and then maybe repeat that. So that's kind of the approach I'm going now.
That sounds great.
So the emotional toll of this situation you were in was pretty extreme, and I imagine very anxiety producing. And how do you think you're able to now take care of yourself? And, at Invested and Rested, we're all about self-care and making sure that you don't burn out while being a real estate investor. Because it is, depending on how you're doing it, it can be very demanding and being in situations can be really intense. So I'm just curious how things are going now and if you're feeling more rested and what's helping you feel that way.
Oh, I feel so much more rested now. But I will tell you, after this experience, I have become more resilient than I ever thought I would be in my life, more than I thought was possible for any human. So I feel like I've really gone through some crap to get to a beautiful other side where now I can handle all the crap, more or less. I was noticing, 4 years, 3.5 years or whatever, it's a long time to go through feeling trapped. And I learned that self-care is kind of critical in this moment when you can't take care of anything else. You have to get good sleep, good food, take care of yourself, right? Get exercise, like whatever you need to do to just keep yourself sane. That is like number one goal, stay sane. Yeah. And, there's a lot of highs and lows with real estate investing, right? When you get served a notice, Jesus Lord, it is like spiral down. I mean, I had this multiple times where I'm like, here, I'm going along, everything's fine. And then get some kind of notification or text or email that just makes my heart sink down to the ground. And I'm like, just heartburn, just thinking about it. Right. But I also noticed that when I would go down to these like low periods, I would have to be really kind to myself for a little while, like a few days, really just give myself the time to process, to feel the feelings, to take care of myself, and that it wasn't going to last forever. Like, but my productivity at work would go down during those times, like my relationship with my children suffered during those times. But most, like, the thing I had to keep telling myself is it's okay. It's not forever. You're going to get through this. It's going to end at some point. And it's hard to really believe that in that moment, but it is 100% true. So that my takeaway, I have another friend going through something very similar right now. He has a tenant in his house and he's in San Francisco, and the process to remove them is very similar to what I had to experience. And he's like, do you have any advice for me? And I said, just take care of yourself. Do everything you can to take care of yourself, because that's my number one lesson learned. There is nothing that you can do sometimes except take care of yourself. And that's, and later he told me that I was right. And I was like, yes, I know something.
Look what I learned.
It's so true. When things are out of your control, all you can do is do what you got to do for yourself. Like, I mean, today's election day and everybody has very strong feelings one way or the other, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, tonight I'm going out with girlfriends and we're doing something totally different. We're having like a workshop on your inner thoughts. Like, it has nothing to do with the election. And I'm very happy that we're doing that, because it's like, there's nothing we can do about the results today. We've voted. So, I totally agree with that statement. And I'm glad you've come out more resilient. And also to note, like, I remember when my first investment deal fell through and I was just sad, and my husband and my dad were like, it's just business. It's just business. And I'm like, screw that. I'm sad. I'm going to cry about it. It's okay. Like, I'm allowed to be sad. But sometimes I think reminding ourselves that it's okay to be sad and upset, and to take time to move through it, however you kind of process different emotions, and instead of just pushing it aside, because it's business, but business is also a big part of your life, especially if it's your livelihood. So
we're all human too. So it doesn't matter if it's business or if it's personal or what it is. Like, we all still have feelings. It doesn't mean there's like this emotional block to the stuff you do. If that was the case, we could all work at the most boring job and hate what we're doing, but like not let that affect our lives.
Love our lives afterwards. It's like, I commend people for that. I would love to work at a shop and stock the shelves and be okay with that. But at the end of the day, I think I'd just be bored.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think what we're speaking on too was one of my biggest learning lessons and like pivot moments that I had. And it was the first time that I decided to go on to a retreat, and not the one that I met you at, Caitlin, the one before that.
Okay.
And I was talking with other investors, and I did not have a story like Hannah's story, but just normal landlord kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, this is hard, or oh, this is annoying, and this tenant this and whatever. And I'm like, how am I ever going to get past this? And people are like, you will. Like, you just start to learn to bounce back. And if you're taking care of yourself, that time to bounce back will continue to get shorter and shorter. And it's still hard, but you just get better. Like Hannah said, you just gain so much resilience from the stuff that you go through. Hopefully not as big as Hannah's, right? But we don't wish that on anybody.
I heard one long story. I think it was on Bigger Pockets about a squatter in Seattle and like her whole investigation into it. They ended up getting him out, but I think it took a whole year. But
I don't have time for that. I would turn into that guy in California that's like making a job out of coming to people's homes to, like, for squatters to squat on the squatters.
I believe he's in Texas, actually. I don't think he'd be allowed in California.
No, there's one in California.
Oh, I don't know about this.
Yeah, next time it comes up on my TikTok, I'll let you guys know.
Maybe I should interview him for my podcast.
I'm curious. Yeah, I think it started, and like, don't quote me if I'm wrong, but I want to say it started because like his mom or his aunt or some loved one had an issue with the eviction moratorium and needed to get them out and couldn't. And so then he's like, I feel bad for all these other landlords that are going through the same thing. I'm going to make a business out of this. And I don't know, I can't remember how it works, but that's wild.
That is wild. I want to know more about this now.
All right, I'm going to look it up after we get off the phone.
We'll research it and get back to you.
It was helpful for me to tell people what was happening, but ultimately, like, I had to process this on my own because people couldn't understand what I was experiencing and they didn't know what to do. It was unprecedented, the pandemic and then the eviction moratorium. No one in living history knew how to handle it. So it was a uniquely me only and very few other people experience. So finding community, that was really important and really helpful. Finding ways to fight it, doing things I could do, that was also really important. But yeah, listening to other people, they'd be like, well, I just changed the locks or I just do this. And I'd be like, yeah, changing the locks will get you arrested here. And like trying to kill someone definitely isn't helpful. No.
Don't want to go to jail.
No. Jail's worse. Jail's worse.
Yeah.
And you still have to live with the woman. Like, it just, no matter all the different things you try to do, like, well, I mean, I guess changing the locks and she couldn't come back in, but she could camp out and be in your face every day.
Break the door down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. Or she could make get her lawyer on you for not keeping the space up correctly.
Exactly.
So wild.
It is so wild what can happen. But hopefully you had your one unlucky instance and the rest will be minor in comparison. Knock on all the wood. But I feel like everybody has a couple, but yours happened to be the first, unfortunately. But it sounds like it got you motivated to do something else with the money while you were sitting there.
And I'm glad you kept going instead of quitting. Like, there's so many great things about investing too. And I'm glad you saw it through.
Yeah. I love real estate. I don't know. I'm just say it's apparently not enough of a deterrent.
Good. Well, you have property managers this time and you're in a different place with different laws. So you should be okay, hopefully. And you won't have to, you'll probably never live with a renter again, I imagine.
Probably not.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah. How can people get in contact with you or check out what you're up to? It sounds like you're starting a podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is going to be called Ethical Real Estate, and you can actually reach out to me at hannah@ethicalrealestate.net. And that's, it's the best way to find me. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook as Ethical Real Estate.
Ethical Real Estate. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you. Everybody's going to want to follow along, I'm sure. And I want to listen too. So thanks so much for coming on today, and we'll chat with you soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, friends. That's the episode for today. We so appreciate you being here with us and would love if you could leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts.
And don't forget to subscribe for future episodes and check the show notes to sign up for the waitlist for our retreats and future coaching programs. Stay rested, friends, and talk soon.